Yeah, so let's get started.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, this is uh, about uh, the grounded theory method. Although the term theory is there in it, it's actually a method. So uh, what I'm going to share with you today is how we use this method in order to actually arrive at a theory. And this is very useful in the context of Indian cities, because in the context of Indian cities, it's very difficult for us to even find theories that we can use and start a research project on the basis of. So sometimes when you have a theory, existing theory, uh, you start from there and you hypothesize from it, and that's how you sort of do your data collection and field work, and then sort of progress in your research. But in the context of Indian cities, it's very difficult to find relevant material, right? Although scholars have been working a lot uh, more now on cities of the global south, it's a little hard. Yeah, can we move to
Yeah.
the next
Continue.
slide?
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So the research gap that the study addresses is the inadequate theorizing on urban informality in the context of the global south. And specifically, the research setting is, a marketplace in Bangalore. And I was looking at only one stakeholder group, street vendors. And since, this was research within public spaces, we were only interested, we were not so much interested in livelihood issues or, the politics of the space. I was looking more at um, how vendors actually move within these spaces. So we looked at only one street, and that's what I'm going to share. So just to give you an idea, this was the street that we were looking at. And for those of you who are either from Bangalore or a little familiar with Bangalore, this is the Shivaji Nagar neighborhood. And Bangalore is basically consists of has two inner city cores. One is the Chickpet area, which is the old city area around the uh, uh, the port settlement, and that was the traditional native town settlement. And then the other one was this, which was also known as Blackpalli. It was the place where um, the cantonment was set up when the British came here. So uh, both of these, Chickpet and Shivaji Nagar, actually had at their core markets. So markets, as many of you would be very familiar, markets in many cities are the starting point of inner city core. What you see on the left hand side, uh, what you can
Yeah.
see on the left hand side is the Russell Market building, and this is a scene from early morning around 6:30. That's when the market is highly busy. Yeah. And just to look at a plan of the same thing. So as I said, it's very interesting. If you look at a Google Earth map, even now, you see Russell Market. It's almost as if all roads converge to Russell Market. So this was the stretch that we were looking at. At one end was the St. Mary's Basilica. As you can also see from this, it says that Dharmaraja Koil Street. Koil is the Tamil word for temple. So on one hand, you have a Christian population because there were a lot of Anglo-Indians in this area, considering that it was the cantonment. So in subsequent decades, there were Anglo-Indian families here. There were Tamilians here, and there is also a very large Muslim population in the area. So in that sense, this street and this neighborhood also offer a really good diversity in terms of population, making the study more interesting for us in terms of understanding neighborhoods and what happens there on the streets. We'll just quickly run through these pictures, Shreyasi. These are just pictures of that area, just to, I think there are a couple of them. Yeah. So this is the tomato auction happening in the morning. Again, as probably all of you are familiar, in India, there is a lot of temporality in the marketplace. Not just marketplace, but in our streets. Yeah, so just to go over, I found it very useful during my research to make this differentiation between what is a research aim and what is a research goal. It's also research, when you're doing your doctoral study, you actually start to learn how to be a bit more structured in your thinking. So some of these definitions become very useful. So our research aim was to show how the contextual learnings from a case in India can help understand the theoretical understanding of urban spatial informality, and also how design strategies can learn from the everyday activities, right? And the objectives were to identify unwritten rules, to analyze the data using grounded theory, and to construct the abstract theoretical framework. Now, one thing that was very, very useful at the very beginning was to ask ourselves, what change do we want to make? Now, considering that informality is so much a part of our cities, to believe that whatever we were going to do was actually going to eliminate informality, or we were actually going to be able to arrive at an urban design plan or a policy which would eliminate informality, was probably not a realistic approach. So, therefore, the way we approached on this project was to assume that it was only possible to reduce informality a bit, right? And also to ask, is it really possible to have zero informality? Additionally, given the fact that planning regulations are not comprehensive, and more than anything else, we do not seem to manage to enforce the regulations that do exist, right? So we all know that enforcement in the Indian scenario is very, it's not all there. So if enforcement isn't happening, although policies are in place and regulations are in place, informality will continue to exist. Right. So at the beginning, I also thought that this was actually part of my PhD work. So I also thought that understanding what actually comes before the informality on the street, right? What are the steps that lead to the informality? I was interested in studying that. So when I say steps, it means that, Shreyasi, can we go back? When I say steps, it means that what is the logic and the decision that the street vendor is going through, which makes him, leads him to an action, which then becomes an informal use of the space. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So as I said, the logic, the decision, and the action. In order to take these decisions, it was what I was actually gathering in terms of data was the tactics and the strategies. So for those of you who are familiar with the work of the cultural theorist Miquel de Certeau, Mikhail Dasarto talks in the chapter on walking in the city. He talks about tactics of walkers and consumers and strategies of administrators and planners, and that was the work I was basing this on. So that's from there we come to tactics of vendors and strategies of the government and how these were going to lead to informality. So that became our research question. Now, grounded theory method is actually, just for you to have a definition, it's a systematic approach to collect and analyze qualitative data. That's very important here, that this is, a method that can be used for qualitative data in order to construct theories which are grounded in the data. So you start with the data. And it was proposed by sociologists Glaser and Strauss way back in 1967. And the key features of this method. So as I said, it starts with data. You separate, sort, synthesize the data through qualitative coding. And then you construct analytic codes and categories from this data, right? So there is no hypothesis. And you conduct the literature review after developing the analysis. Now, while that is the case with the classic grounded theory, as you can see, as I just shared, the classic grounded theory was proposed in 1967, but after 1967, there have been other people who have come up with some hybrid versions of the grounded theory. So I was actually using a hybrid version. There is Glaser and Strauss wrote the book called Inventing Grounded Theory, but the one that I used was, what one of their students, actually PhD students, Kathy Sharma's, she wrote this book called Discovering Grounded Theory. And that was the one I used, where you are not entirely away from literature in the beginning. You are reading a little bit of literature, even before you are framing your questions in the field. So that was the one I used. And so after you arrive at these codes and categories, you start to establish relationships between them, and that's how you build the theory. I'll be showing you how I went about it. So I've divided this presentation into 4 parts. The first part is the visual data part. How did we gather visual evidence for the movement of vendors? And we were looking at not just that street. Actually, later I expanded the study to also this third one that you see there, because I had by then realized that there was the everyday to be studied, but there was also the festival day, which was different from the everyday. So 365 days in the year, there was a certain kind of movement pattern and behavior pattern, but on festival days, these patterns were completely displaced. So this, we are looking at the everyday or the ordinary day, where I told you earlier there are tomato auctions. And what you see here, these are actually commission agents who are actually on the phone. So even though the auction is happening for the tomato market, the people who are buying are not actually here. So they just strike the deal every morning on the phone. And then these auto rickshaws just come in, and whatever deal has been struck for the amount and for the quantity, then that much is loaded onto the auto rickshaw. This is the third one that you saw, the Taj Square, which becomes actually very active during Ramzan. So that's the reason why I chose it. And I'll be showing you how there is this difference between the ordinary day and what I then chose to call the extraordinary day, which is basically the festival day. This is a plan of the same thing, the photograph that you just saw with so what's interesting here is that, you have these extensions into the footpath or the road which becomes informal usage. But now, as you can see in this one, the extension is an occupation or appropriation of that public space is being made by the Taj Hotel folks, who are actually formal vendors who are paying rent for the space, whom you and I would never consider informal vendors. They are formal vendors, uh, uh, and they only operate legally. But in this case, they are actually on the street, on the using public space. Do they pay for it? Yes, they do pay for it. So for the month of Ramzan, when they occupy the street like that, some money exchanges and some money is exchanged between them and the municipality. So this is quite big. I mean, it's not between the traffic police and them; it's between the municipality and them. This is the same part. On the left is the Ramzan celebration that you just saw, the Ramzan food stall that you just saw from the Taj Hotel. Taj Hotel is to the left, and this is the street corner right there. Just for you to get an idea, this was the kind of visual data, visual data and visual evidence, as I said, of how vendors are moving and appropriating space. And on the last day of Ramzan, it's not just the food vending. So that entire stretch, so this is called, you see that mosque on the right hand side, left corner, you see that mosque. So that road is called, is actually the whole mosque road stretch. And during that last day, it is pedestrianized and prayers happen there. And this is, you see Russell Market on the right-hand side there. So it's this road between this mosque and Russell Market, which leads to the square that we just saw. Yeah. So the Taj Hotel is the street that goes through the center of this photograph. And apart from Ramzan, I was also interested in studying another extraordinary day or festival day, and that is Christmas, because we were, the Russell Market Street has the St. Mary's Basilica at one end, and during Christmas, there are a lot of different stalls that come up here. A lot of facilitation from the government. So as you can see, just outside the basilica, there is a police van. There will be a ambulance standing nearby. And the reason why this photograph is here is also to show that while all of this is about informality, the government coming in to facilitate this informality, raises the question: is this really informal or is it formal? Because now these are phenomena that are getting government facilitation. So should we be calling this informality at all, right? But then that's what's interesting about things related to public spaces in India, that the lines between the formal and the informal are blurred. They are not only blurred in the public space, but also in governance. Right? In the way governance happens, there is the lines between the formal and informal are very blurred. For those of you who are interested, you might also want to read Gautam Man's work. He talks in one of his papers, he talks about, defining legal, illegal, formal, informal, and legitimate and illegitimate. So I think some of these things, they are not legal, they are illegal, but then they are legitimate, in the sense that legitimacy has been lent to them because they have been happening for so many years. And so the government sort of allows this to happen, right? Yeah. Now, I talked earlier about the logic, decision, action. This actually comes, like I said, I was reading some literature. even while fieldwork was happening. So I did the fieldwork in 2 phases. In the first phase of the fieldwork, first set of interview data collection, I was not looking at, I did not sort of do as much literature study, but by the time the second data set was being collected, I was already looking at the work of Herbert Simon, who is actually an economist. He won a Nobel Prize in economics, and he is also a computer scientist, and all of that was. Um, he talks in his book, Sciences of the Artificial, about decision making. And he also says that everybody is a designer who takes a given situation to a desired situation um, by devising courses of action. So in that sense, he proposes that each of us, including street vendors, including traffic police, in just moving from a given situation to a desired situation, we become designers. Now, what was the logic? So identifying the logic of the informal vendor then became one of the tasks that I had to do in the field. And this Venn diagram that you see, it actually is based on feedback from one single vendor. And I was absolutely excited because vendor, there was total clarity for him. He told me that, I would occupy a space where there is no vehicular traffic, where vehicular traffic is not obstructed, where pedestrian flow is high, and where the shop owner is not obstructed. And so that led to this Venn diagram and understanding of what is the basic logic that they use. So there are 3 things that one can look at: the locational choice. What is the logic in arriving at the choice of location? What are the tactics that I use as a vendor to arrive at um, this location? What gets me there? And how much do I have to pay? So locational choice varies. So, here you see there are 2 variables here. You have ordinary day, festival day, different things happen. So locational choice on an ordinary day, some vendors have fixed locations, but others occupy space that is available. Festival day, vendors actually come from other parts of the city and occupy spots. And the regular vendors sometimes sell their spots to these people who come from other neighborhoods for a premium, and they just go home. Yeah, Shreyasi next. Then tactics. On an ordinary day, what happens? Over time, vendors develop a relationship with their fellow vendors and the formal shop owners. So it's their social capital that's helping them to protect their location. On a festival day, what happens? Allocation of the footpath depends on how the street vendor again might use his networks. But here he needs, stronger networks. So sometimes it's a local councillor who will get him a prime spot which has high footfall. Yeah. Economics, they on a regular basis they pay 10 rupees to the traffic police, but on a festival day the stakes are very high. So the shop owner sometimes will charge 25,000 for a vendor to occupy footpath space which doesn't really belong to the shop owner, but because he thinks that he's allowing the street vendor to occupy space blocking his own visibility, he has the right to charge 25,000, right? And all of this is pretty organized. Moving on to the part 2, we did a bit of mapping as well. What were we mapping? So as I said, initial study had 20 interviews and these 20 vendors existing locations. So here existing situation, I mean location. So the map actually shows you their existing location. And then, based on the interviews, we arrived at these 4 categories. Existing situation for some was not the preferred situation. For some, it was. for some vendors, preferred situation was an old location that they had occupied. And for another set of vendors, it was a new location somewhere else, in another neighborhood or in a neighboring street. So what this diagram shows you is the existing and their preferred. And then I coined this term called situation satisfaction, which is, the same thing that you saw earlier. Yeah, next. So just for you to know, how does the sampling work in grounded theory? You determine the sample size based on data saturation. What that means is that when no new insights are being arrived at anymore, then you know that you can stop. That means the data that you're getting starts to become repetitive. Then you know that, okay, I'm kind of reaching a saturation point, and you stop. So in this case, 70 vendors were interviewed. We'll skip this. I think I'll go on. Yeah. Now the part 3 was analyzing the data. And I think in grounded theory, this becomes the most important part. How does the coding process actually work? I hope you guys can see this well on your screen. So there are 3 stages. There is initial coding or line-by-line coding. There is focus coding. There is theoretical coding. Now, what you see here in each of these tables, and I think this is, the part that you should understand well, because this is really the crux of using the method. What you do is you do your interviews, then you transcribe them. I was very lucky. I was able to get street vendors to allow me to record the interview. So all the 70 interviews were recorded. Then they were transcribed. The transcribed text is what you see here. And for all the transcribed text, a line by line coding is done, and then you arrive at certain keywords you pull out. I'm sure that in the methods that some of you have used, you have used coding. Here, the difference is that you first do the line by line coding. Then in the next column, what you see, focus coding, you start combining these codes, which also other methods use. So here, for example, I have been doing business here since 25 to 30 years. It's an existing situation. So I start labeling, right? Code is a label. So you start labeling. You see another sentence there, we don't want to move from here, which means that that's his preferred situation. Then they watch out for me and I watch out for them. We help each other. So there you insert a label, reciprocity. On the other side, you start either combining codes or you start deleting codes, right? So you start reducing the number of codes. Now, this is what helped me arrive at these terms that you see on the right side. They became the important terms in the analysis. Existing situation equal to preferred situation then became the key thing: social capital, spatial negotiation, and so on. And then using that, you then develop the theoretical coding. So here what you need to look at, I don't know if you're able to read, but what's important to look at is the 2 questions at the bottom. How do the categories such as existing equal to preferred arise out of an analysis of vendor situation or his situation satisfaction? How does this form the decision? This leads to what comes before the decision, right? So what you're trying to do is dissect informality, arrive at what exactly is the antecedent. We move on. You all can list out your questions, and I know it's not so straightforward, but yeah, list out some questions and then we can talk about it. So the theoretical framework, that's the last part of the grounded process. So like I said, there is the logic, then there is a decision, which is, so the logic involves all the tactics and stuff. He's sort of figuring out what he should do, who he should make friends with, what is a good time of the day to occupy that particular spot on the footpath. um, what tactics will work, how can he keep other vendors away, and so on. And then that lets him arrive at the decision, which is this existing location my preferred location, or is it the previous one, is it the next one? So that makes up the decision part. And then that leads to his final movement. So here the course of action is the final movement, that my preferred situation is the same, so I don't move. My preferred situation is a new location, so I move there. Right? So that's the action he's taking. Yeah. Here, I'm not going to go deeper into inner environment and outer environment, but for those of you who are interested in the paper that has, see that paper has been shared, right?
Yes, yes, I've shared.
So in that paper that's shared, Logic of Design, Antecedents of Urban Informality, uh, there's a lot more that has been explained on the inner environment, outer environment bit. Basically, inner environment is social capital, outer environment is external factors. Implications of, next, we can go to the next. Implications of the research, I think it's very important to understand what should one then do, with these findings. How does one, for me, it was very important that it contribute to urban design theory, but also to practice. So when I say contribute to urban design theory, you have to look at, okay, what is the literature that already exists on this? What is the literature that already exists on everyday life or everyday urbanism? Hmm? And then in case of urban design practice, uh, there was another paper that was generated out of this research, which is called Ordinary City and Extraordinary City. Um, and I thought that, we have a master plan, which is usually a 5-year master plan. Also, the master plan is drawn at a scale of 1:10,000, but what we probably need is an annual plan, because if things are changing on the ground on an everyday basis, for us to have a 5-year plan or even have an annual plan actually is not good enough. But apart from all of that, we also need to be able to bring in temporality. So what this research helped do, and that's in the other paper, that's in the paper called Ordinary City and Extraordinary City. What it helped do was also create this framework on how one can use an understanding of the everyday and an understanding of the festival day in order to then come up with a more realistic urban design plan. And this is something you can use for any neighborhood. Now, if you're not a researcher but an urban design practitioner, then that's something you can keep in mind. And then for urban planning practice, as I said, an annual plan is what we need. It has been specified in the URDPFI guidelines, but it has actually never been implemented in any city in India so far. So for us to, as architects, urban designers, through our associations, national level associations, to push for the implementation of the annual plan becomes important. Yeah. I think the last slide is for those of you who are interested, if you go to our website, there is a section on research where each of these boxes will lead you to the paper. So you should be able to find something on each of these papers and links to the work. Yeah. I think we are not bad. We are almost on time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I think we can now open. We are now open for with any of you have. You can put your questions in the chat box also, or you can directly ask questions also. But very quickly, we'll just take a couple of questions maybe, and maybe the rest can email ma'am. I've also sent ma'am's email ID to everyone in case we can't accommodate all the questions now. It's,
Yeah. And we can sort of go over by 10 minutes or so, no issues.
Yes, you can ask your questions, please. So while we wait, maybe I'll ask one. So, ma'am, the coding that you have done, was it done manually or using any software?
No, it was done manually.
Manually.
Yeah.
And like
This was
7.
this was done way back, but I'm sure now there should be better ways of doing things.
Yeah.
Uh,
Even now, I think there's a lot of manual, but not like people don't necessarily use coding softwares, but generally Excel, Word, maybe there's a lot of coding done there itself. They do that. So just wonder, I was curious how this was done.
no, we did. In fact, even our mapping would look so archaic to a lot of people who are using softwares and. Yeah. In fact, this whole thing of how people move, behave, and all of that. For those of you who are familiar with uh, this space syntax thing, in fact, just yesterday, one of my interns who studied space syntax in London, she was telling me that we use mathematical models to figure out how people move, behave. So yeah, a lot of things are possible today. I think there's some questions I can see.
Yes.
Uh, yeah, good afternoon. Can I just ask the question? I'd already typed it in. Yeah, so thank you so much for the informative presentation, ma'am. I'm a conservation architect based in Bangalore. So I've done a couple of studies on markets itself. My master's thesis was on markets. So I just would like to understand if, cultural and historical values that these markets have influenced the spatial informality for the vendors. If yes, do they have any specific patterns?
Um, Roshni, as I showed you, that ordinary day, extraordinary day, all of that is that cultural, historical
Yeah,
value.
yeah,
Yeah, definitely. It does influence the spatial informality. In fact, the spatial configuration changes completely. Um, but what that pattern is, I did not specifically study it for the festival day.
okay.
What we did, what we were interested in was um, how is it displacing the everyday. So, so we even for us to arrive at that much was quite something. But and also it was not just the spatial patterns that I was interested in, although the study was being done in the public space domain, and I was doing it as an urban designer, but even so I was not interested in only knowing about the spatial configuration. So for example, those three things that you saw on one of the slides: locational choice, um, economics of the space, and I think tactics. I think those things were also very important, that, how does all of that get affected? And it
Yeah.
does. So these parameters that we were using were different for an ordinary day and for a festival day. And everything on a festival day is cultural, historical. But I think also on an everyday, it's cultural. It's not as if,
Yeah.
culture is festival.
True.
Everyday life is the
Yes,
culture of the
that's.
people. Yeah.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
Um, there's another question. You can ask the question directly, or then otherwise I'll read it out. Amit, you. All right. His question is how to address issues of accessibility for persons with disabilities in our overcrowded urban cores. Um,
Uh, so Amit, are you here?
Yes, ma'am. Am I audible?
yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So Amit, this is actually a question out of the range of the presentation, really. But I would like to know from you, why do you ask that question? I mean, right after looking at this presentation, was there something that triggered off this question? Is there something you saw there that triggered it off, or is this been a pressing question for you forever?
This has been a pressing question, and your presentation really triggered because at 6:30 a.m. the kind of crowd was seen in that scenario. This is a question, in fact, I'm trying to address. I'm studying on this question right now. Actually, I'm a faculty at Manipal, and this how to address the issues of accessibility for they get neglected, and most of the our policies remain on paper. So how to really address in real world scenarios? So I'm trying to address. So I just and seeing those images especially, and how the street behaves differently, but hardly we care for the people who need more care. That's why that question got triggered.
Yeah. So Amit, I think that if one were to try and address this, because we don't have everything. I mean, so questions of accessibility and groups that are not able to maneuver through these crowded environments. I think the answer would be to not just push for policies which are specifically for them, because not everything is anyway sorted out, even for people who don't have those issues, right? So I think our approach could be to first reduce the crowds. Now, how do you reduce the crowd? So in the context of this work, for example, one of the things that this research would attempt to lead to is a different street vendor policy, which is typically in a street vendor policy, you have a no parking zone, you have a no vending zone, partial vending zone, and full vending zone, right? But the street vendor policy doesn't really customize the policy for each neighborhood. There is a provision for a town vending committee. So what you would do is make sure that first of all, town vending committee is formed. Now I'm only talking in terms of street vending because just as an example, that how would one approach this? So if one make sure that a town vending committee is formed, and town vending committee also involves resident welfare associations. That means that we shouldn't feel helpless, that the government is not doing anything, therefore we cannot do anything. We can always demand for these town vending committees to be formed. So once these committees are formed, then you have to say that you need to really map each neighborhood and look at the problem from the specific neighborhood perspective, and not just give one wide policy for the entire city. But we don't seem to right now do that. So first job would be to customize, because when we customize and say that we have a distribution and an understanding of vending zones, I think that might lead, first of all, to less crowding.
Yes.
Because within these kinds of crowds, no matter what we do, I don't think we can provide persons with disabilities any comfort. Because it's impossible. It's for most people, it's impossible, difficult to move within overcrowded zones. So someone with disability is going to find it very difficult. You can't say that we will have a different traffic light for them. That's not going to work. We're not going to be able to say that the footpath should open up so that they can do things differently. Like a bicycle path, you have a different path. Already the street is crowded. How is that going to work? So I think in India, the problem really lies with the numbers. It's not like we are not efficient. It's not like we are not smart. We are very smart. We are very efficient in India. It's just that we have a very large population to deal with. So I think one of our tasks has to be how to distribute that population at the neighborhood level, how to make it easier to deal with.
Yes, thank you so much, ma'am. So for your insightful answer. So context-based solution instead of the generic policies is, I guess, the way ahead.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We have another question. After finishing the research, did you discover any parameters that were overlooked or omitted?
Yeah. There's Shivali, there's always more than enough that is overlooked, omitted. But I think for me, more than overlooked or omitted was that there was so much that was yet to be discovered. So as some of you who are already in the PhD or have finished PhDs already would know that when you get into a PhD, you don't feel very great when you finish. You only have this horrible feeling that, oh, I really don't know anything. So that's what you feel at the end. So for me, it was, and actually that was the reason why right after the PhD, so I did a very late PhD. I finished in 2018, and I decided that, I wanted to set up the Everyday City Lab. So that actually came out of my PhD work, because I thought to myself, I can easily do another 10, 20 years of this work. I would love to share one thing though. So as you can see in the research, I was using this framework, different frameworks actually in the beginning. One from Herbert Simon, where he talks about the decision making. The other from Michel de Certeau, the tactics and strategies part. So I was only using these, right? But I felt during the PhD itself that to understand the everyday city, it was not enough to look at it from the framework of tactics and strategies. And so therefore, in 2015 already, I had actually I conducted a winter school at CEPT. It was the first winter school that I did called Everyday City. The Everyday City Lab didn't exist at the time, but the reason why that winter school happened was because I felt that tactics and strategies was a very limited framework. And I was also beginning to define everyday practices as being social practices, cultural practices, economic, religious.
Ma'am, ma'am, your feed is frozen. I don't know. It's from my end at least.
Yes, I think she must be having an internet connection.
I'll just make a call.
Yeah, I think we're back.
Yeah. Now you're back.
Yeah. So as I was saying, that there was, this other definition which was emerging of the everyday city, and in order to explore that, I couldn't really do it within the PhD work. So while the PhD was still going on, I was conducting that school there, and it was very useful because we started to do group projects on the ground. The students were doing these group projects, and this happened in Ahmedabad. We looked at the Manek Chowk area, and the group projects were, focusing either on social practice or on cultural practice, and so on. So in that sense, it allowed a little more exploration, and that is what finally, led to setting up the Everyday City Lab. So I would say that maybe that was what was omitted, but it's difficult to put everything into the PhD. In the PhD, you are only allowed to have one research question. So it's not exactly as if it could have been included if the realization had come. The realization came, but it couldn't have been included. So it had to be done outside of the PhD as another research project.
So we have another question, Karthik, but I think ma'am has already answered. I think no software were used at this point. Yeah.
Yeah. So can you imagine you'll be able to do like 10 times the quantum of work and perhaps even qualitatively with the knowledge you'll have of software. So yeah.
Yeah. Can you take another question?
Yeah, we can.
No, I personally want to ask that when we do any kind of urban design studio as well as you had also conducted, this entire thing about like you how you had operationalized your the theory and you have picked up certain theories from even different academic orientations, because there's a decision theory and there is this whole idea of tactics and strategies from a sociologist perspective, right? So on a personal level only I'm asking, say when we try and look at any Indian urban scenario, we always we have this entire very rich north centric literature. Your everyday practices also has very strong Lefebvrean undertones, right? And then we have the entire southern urbanism theories. You also mentioned Bhan there. So at some point, even when we are conducting some company as an urban design studio perspective, that also affects the way you conduct the research, how you frame the questions also. How do you actually this north south divide the theory, and as you say it's kind of a hybrid model, how what part you take and how do you in some way there is a problem there as well. The south and the north do not always agree, and even then the way we frame the questions also kind of you have to in some way reach, you know what I'm asking, right? So
Yeah,
how
let
do we
me let me. I know what you're asking. Let me try and answer. So, Shreyasi, I think that was a struggle, and the reason why I chose grounded theory was because initially I kept telling my PhD committee members that I'm not finding suitable literature,
yeah.
and they said that's not possible. They said no. I mean, there's so much literature out there. You're not searching enough, and it was frustrating because we are not able to relate to that literature. We know that it is not what we are finding, or right, but there is also, and this is something that even the you know the top scholars, like for example in informality, in urban informality, one of the top scholars is Ananya Roy, right, who was Gautam Man's PhD advisor. um, Ananya Roy herself, being first at Berkeley and now, at another place, she herself sort of struggles and fights for um, getting scholars from the South to be able to say that, this is our theory and the rest of the world needs to follow it. But that isn't happening yet, right?
it's very context specific, no? The southern theory that is emerging also. Like in
Yeah, it's
ordinary
context
cities.
specific, but also a whole different theory would emerge because the context is different, right? The theory itself. Now, as a early PhD scholar or as a young faculty, I think everybody has this issue that I want to publish in an international journal, right? So I had that issue as well. I was wanting my work to be out there, and so I was trying to publish it in the first paper. Wanted it to be published in the Journal of Urban Design, because for me that was the journal that I didn't want cities, I didn't want urban studies, I wanted Journal of Urban Design. Um, and it was a struggle, I must say, to read that literature and then make this fit there. It was a forced fit, but I can tell you that once that paper got published, what has been happening after that. um, so for example, the big thing uh, for me, and I think that that's for everybody who's in this field. Last year I was invited to contribute a chapter to the Routledge Handbook of Urban Design Research Methods. Now, I thought that that was super success because there's a handbook coming out. My paper had not received too many citations, okay? But somebody who was on that editorial board thought that this was a paper that was context specific, and yet it had theory. So I think it's a long wait, Shreyasi, because I don't think that just the book chapter going into that handbook and getting into Routledge Handbook of Urban Design Research Methods for me was super big. But I think it's not yet over, right?
Mm.
Just because that chapter is there still doesn't mean that it's completely Southern text. It's not, right? So I think with more of us working towards this, with more and more work getting out there, somewhere there will be a South only scholarship coming out.
Hope so.
Yeah. So I think, yeah, I mean, right now, if we publish in India, we're not going to be able to get there. So you have to publish in an international journal and then slowly,
Yeah.
get there.
Also, maybe some other day, I don't know whether you can get into this. I would like to also ask you, it's from what I see, it seems to be a very inductive process. So the questionnaire framing, because I'm guessing it's not a survey, it's going to be maybe open or semi-structured kind of conversation might have been having. So maybe, but I don't know whether you can
Yeah, happy to have that
cover
conversation. Yeah,
Yeah,
we can have
the
that
time.
conversation anytime.
Ma'am has joined us. So, ma'am, some words for you to wrap up this very interesting
Yeah, yeah.
session.
First of
Yeah,
all,
Dr. Shaila,
sorry.
thanks for this invite, first of all. Yeah,
No,
thank
in
you.
fact, I badly wanted to attend your session. Unfortunately, whole day, morning to till now, again simultaneously the inspection is happening. So, but still, I didn't wanted to miss your session. So, but I 90% I missed your session. But again, I'll go through the recording. First of all, Kiran, thank you so much. The intention of these kind of a research dialogue is to make the aware of what kind of a research is, like what kind of a tools you can use it. Most of the faculties now, as you rightly said, when you enroll for PhD, then the international journal publication is more important and all that. So similarly nowadays for even all the faculties and all that, there are a lot of different benchmarks. Now PhD is one is very very compulsory, at a root level. Now in that case, and again another challenge is like most of them are from the part-time PhD, so that is another biggest challenge. So for that there are very few platforms where they can even go through this kind of a thing, and that was the main objective of this kind of having research dialogue series. And especially we are focusing more on an individual approach, like not like very vague research methods, like otherwise end of the day it will become another lecture on research methods or methodology. So we are focusing more on not only on a generic research methodology or something, but individual specific, because each topic will have its own tool, its own technique, and its own way of analysis and all that. So that was the main intention, and we are really getting good response, because we made our audience a mindset that every month we are going to have this kind of a thing. So we are getting really good response. So that was the main intention of having these kind of a
No, but it's a
research.
lot of work at your end, I guess, to do it every month is quite a bit.
Yes, identifying, and especially even integrated people also, like interdisciplinary also we are calling expertise. Last time I think one of the faculty from Delhi economics background, a really amazing presentation. Even now also I'm learning a lot, because during our time, because I enrolled in 2010 to 15 that time as a full time, but still we didn't had so many these AI research tools. And I learned in one of the session more than I think 50 apps she mentioned about it. So unfortunately we didn't expose to those kind of a thing. And so we somewhere we felt these are really useful for the faculties who have registered for PhD. And amazing presentations, amazing resource person we have it as of now, thanks to Shreyasi. I'm not putting so much of effort, but every month she gets with a very very good resource person. So that's why I think this is running so successfully. We don't want to break this kind of session, but that mindset I think everybody has it now, because every month BMSS is having these research dialogue series, and they're waiting for it, I'm sure, for that. And so again I missed it, but again Kiran, I wanted you to be a part of our, even because we are thinking couple of new approaches, especially how our students can be equipped with the publication part, or writing skills basically. So hopefully I will trouble you again for a first year maybe induction program where we want to go with a lot of foundation skills, like which is really important for students to understand, like, basic citation or maybe how to narrate a story and all those things. So we'll get back to you, and I really want to go through your presentation, and then maybe I'll get back to you.
Sure. Thanks
Thank
again.
you. Thank you so much.
You're muted, I think, Shreyasi.
Yeah, Shreyasi, you need to unmute.
No, I'm just saying thank you. Thank you everyone for joining us, and we'll meet again in another month's time. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.